Hello and welcome to Capital Dateline, brought to you by the Florida Cable Telecommunications Association. I'm Brad Swanson, your host, and I am once again joined by Jim Saunders, Executive Editor of the News Service of Florida. Jim, welcome.
Thanks.
Got a lot going on in Florida as usual. Let's get right down to it. So, Florida Chamber, Enterprise Florida, a bunch of folks met down in Orlando last week, and the governor was there to talk about some economic development spending he has planned.
Well, he's revving up the engine again for economic incentives, trying to get $85 million next year for economic incentives to try to attract businesses to the state. But as you recall, that was a huge fight during the last legislative session when he sought $250 million. And the House pretty much said no, no, no. So this is
a lot of no's.
This is already gearing up as a possible or likely point of contention for the 2017 session. The governor did announce this at this Enterprise Florida event, and pretty quickly the new House Speaker, incoming House Speaker Richard Corcoran, put out a statement that said the House is not going to go along with corporate welfare, which translated means we're not passing this $85 million. Now, a lot can change during the session. There's a lot of deals get cut and so on. And also the incoming Senate Appropriations Chairman, Jack Latvala, has kind of signaled that he'd be willing to provide money for incentives. But I think the House is pretty dug in on this issue. I was kind of comparing it the other day to how the House handled the Medicaid expansion, if you remember that from a couple years ago. The issue kept coming back, and the House was dug in and said, we're not doing it, and it never got done. And that appears to be kind of the tack that Corcoran is taking at this point on that issue.
Well, you know, Corcoran might have a different voting bloc, at least by one seat. What happened last week in one of the House members' districts?
Well, it's not funny, but Representative Reggie Fullwood pleaded guilty to in federal court to charges related to misuse of campaign funds. He basically was accused of using his campaign fund for his personal expenses. So there was a wire-related federal charge, as well as a charge for not filing his tax returns. And he's basically leaving office. He'd won his primary on August 30th and was going to be on the November ballot to defend his seat. But he had to give notice on Friday that he's not running again. It creates sort of an interesting situation in that his name is going to be on the ballot, it appears, in this district in Jacksonville. But the Democratic Party is going to have to find a replacement candidate pretty fast. So voters will go into the polling place and see Reggie Fullwood's name on the ballot, but they'll be voting for somebody else. The saving grace for Democrats in that seat is it's a heavily Democratic district. I mean, it's overwhelmingly Democratic district. So, you know, they may be able to hold on to it that way, but even with his name on the ballot. But it adds a wrinkle to this whole thing. Republicans do have a candidate in that race. Now, whether they're going to put much time and effort into, you know, trying to win at that race or that seat is a little bit early to tell at this point. But, you know, Reggie Fullwood, he's been in the House since 2010. He was on the Jacksonville City Council for years before that. You know, his political career looks, at least in the short term, looks over. And he's, you know, facing some serious penalties as well.
Yeah,
so.
Yeah. Well, we'll have to stay tuned to see what Democrat candidate steps into that seat.
Yeah.
All right, so let's go to another topic that is always cause for interest amongst Floridians, and that's gambling.
Yeah.
You've got a couple of key players in that world gambling to see who's going to win a lawsuit. Let's talk about that.
Well, there's a federal lawsuit, federal trial starts today in Tallahassee. This is a long-running fight between the Seminole Tribe of Florida and the state over, it relates back to a gambling agreement that was reached in 2010 between the state and the tribe. Part of that agreement allowed the tribe to offer games like blackjack at some of their tribal casinos in exchange for the tribe paying the state quite a bit of money every year. And that part of the deal expired last year, and the state and the tribe have been fighting ever since about whether the tribe should be able to continue offering those games. There's a lot of money involved here. The state says, the deal is done, or it's expired. You don't have the right to do it. The tribe has fired back that not only do they have the right to do it, but that the state actually invalidated the agreement because it allowed things to go on at parimutuel facilities that shouldn't have gone on. So this has been going on for a while. I think there was a lot of hope or possibility that if the legislature during this year's session could have passed a gambling bill, it would have somehow resolved this issue. If you remember correctly, Governor Scott put out a gambling proposal at one point, but it never got off the ground. There was never a deal. So this whole tribe issue did not get resolved, and now they're in federal court, which is a place that's difficult for anybody. I also think that probably whatever happens at the U.S. District Court level will get appealed. There's a lot of tribal issues that go up on appeal in the federal court system because tribal gambling law as well as sovereignty laws are very complex in the federal court system.
Yeah. Well, we'll have to stay tuned to see what happens with that. I know a lot of Floridians and Florida businesses depend on the direction of where that industry is going. So we'll stay tuned.